Going backwards.
No, we didn't go back.
Can be dedicated to Adina Aviva.
Yes, it should be Le'ilui Nishma Adina Bat Aviva. So page 442, the Torah tells us, we know that Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Pasuk 12, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Alei alai hahara, come up to me to the top of the mountain, Veheyesham, and be there, V'etna lecha es luchos ha'even, v'hatorah, v'hamitzvah, asher kasabti lo rosam. So that we spent some time on last week. You know, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to give Moshe? And there were a number of different opinions as to precisely what this meant. Clearly, Luchos HaEven means the tablets of stone, the Luchos HaEven, the tablets of stone. What exactly was on the tablets of stone? So most Meforshim say that what was on the tablets of stone were the 10 Commandments, right? The 10 Commandments, not like we see them with just the first two words, or just the first word, lo, 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 lo. It wasn't like that. The whole Dibur was written on the Luchos, and we know that it was what we call Michtav Elokim. It was written with God's writing. So what does that mean, it was written with God's writing? So there's a number of different commentaries as to explaining what God's writing was. So as an example, we know that a samach, that the letter samach, which is a circular letter connected, that if you would try to carve that letter into a rock, you couldn't, right? Why? Because the middle, right, you would wind up with just a circle. Only a Kadosh Baruch Hu could carve a samach into the letter, or a mem into the letter, right, a mem sofit, in a way that the middle part would stay there, right?
The only problem I have with this is if you look at the Jewish Encyclopedia, the letters were different many years ago, and the samach and the mem sofit didn't work.
Okay, all right, but this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara talks about this. Some say that what was Michtav Elokim about this was that you could read it from both sides, right? In other words, you know, when you're driving in front of an ambulance and you look in your rear view mirror, it doesn't say ambulance, right? It says ambulance if you turn around and look at it, but right? So you can't look, often you can't look at something from both sides. But here, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote these luchos, you could look at them. You could look at them from both sides. There's another interpretation, a fascinating interpretation in the Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah says about these, about these luchos. So the Medrash Rabbah says, the Medrash Rabbah, in interpreting the pasuk of Meleah Ketores, talking about what was brought as his offering, Shebein kol dibur v'dibur shahayu ksubim beluchos, that in between every dibur in the luchos was found parshioseha v'digdukeha shel Torah. Right. So what is the Medrash saying? The Medrash says very interesting that you had the dibur, and then here was the next dibur. I sort of imagine it in large font, right? You know, a large font here, I am the Lord your God, and a large font here, right? Don't have any other gods besides me. And in between was all of the details, right? All of the details. And in fact, the Medrash makes reference to it by saying it is, it's a play on the word Galile Kesef or Galile Zahav. Right, so here says the Medrash, Ma hagalim halalu bein gal gadol legal gadol galim ktanim, kach bein kol dibur v'dibur parshioseha shel Torah havu ksuvim v'tiktukeha. In other words, when you go to the shore, so not every wave that comes in is a big wave. I mean, every child knows this, right? Right, every child who goes to the shore, right? Not every the surfers go out, right? But not every wave that comes in is a big wave. There are big waves, and then what happens? And then there's smaller waves, and then another big wave, and then smaller waves, and then I don't know why it's like that, but it is like that. Bigger waves and smaller waves. Says the Medrash, it's the same thing with the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were the big waves. And in between these big waves were all of the small waves. In other words, all of what's included, all of the digdukeh, all of the particulars, all the specifics. And Rav Saadia Gaon is very famous for this. Rav Saadia Gaon says that included in the Aseres HaDibros are all 613 commandments. That the Aseres HaDibros are not the 10 commandments, but they are the 10 categories, according to Rav Saadia Gaon. The 10 categories, and subsumed in each category are all of the other mitzvos, so that you have the entire 613 commandment body subsumed here in the Aseres HaDibros. Okay, that's Rav Saadia Gaon, perhaps connected somehow to this Medrash. So what, in effect, is Moshe Rabbeinu getting? Everything. Moshe Rabbeinu is getting everything.
It's not getting the Drush part of the Torah.
The alphabet in those days, was it our Hebrew alphabet? Was it,
No, so Mark is saying that right. Mark is saying that it was a different style of alphabet than the alphabet that we're used to. I'm not sure what it was, but whatever, maybe next week. Whatever it was, right? It was a different style than what we're used to.
Any indication how big it was?
How big the luchos were?
Right.
Well, they were big enough that they could fit it. Two of them could fit into Moshe's hands. There was Moshe could carry them. They were heavy. They were very heavy, heavier than 4 chairs, right? They were very heavy, right? But Moshe was able to carry them. And some say when Moshe broke the luchos, he didn't have to pick them up and throw them down. They were so heavy. They just, when the letters flew off of the luchos, which made them heavy, they just fell out of his hands. They were too heavy for him to hold. So how big the luchos were, I don't know. We do know, right? The luchos fit into the Aron Kodesh, right? The first set of luchos were measured exactly the size of the Aron Kodesh. Kadosh Baruch Hu worked it out so that it was exactly the size of the Aron Kodesh.
Which is what, like 10
So the Aron Kodesh was 2.5 amos by 1.5 amos, right? An amma is 1.5 feet. So 2.5 amos is I don't know.
3 foot 9 inches.
How big?
3 foot 9 inches.
An amma is 1.5 feet. So 2.5 amos, 3.9 inches. 3 foot 9 inches. 3 foot 9 inches and 1.5, right? 1.5 amos, right? 1.5 amos is okay. So that's how big they were, right? Not huge, not huge. The luchos fit into the Aron Kodesh. Okay, so
stone is stone.
stone, right? Stone is stone.
Sapphire, actually.
Well, the first ones were sapphire, so that actually creates a little bit of an issue because it's referred to here as luchos ha'evan. So luchos ha'evan, and we're talking about the first 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu is up there. Luchos ha'evan means tablets of stone. So the sapphire is also stone, right? Sapphire it's a fancy stone. It's a precious stone, right? But it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a stone, right? So it could be referred to that as well. Okay. So we said that this is that all of these phrases are referring to different things to give us the sense that Moshe Rabbeinu received everything at Har Sinai. Right? He received everything at Har Sinai. The luchos ha'eben, we say the luchos were the luchos, the aseres hadibros. This is from the Gemara Maseches Brachos. The Torah was mikra. What is mikra? Whatever was written down. Chamishe chumshe Torah, right? The 5 books of the Torah, plus Navi that Moshe Rabbeinu got.
No, it didn't happen.
Right, correct. Moshe Rabbeinu got Navi also, right? Moshe Rabbeinu had this. All of this was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? All of this was given to Moshe Rabbeinu.
We spent weeks saying that he got the Torah up to that point, and then page by page, it was dictated by God later on.
Correct.
So if it was on the Luchos, then how,
No, we're not saying this was all on the luchos. In other words, we're saying that the 613 mitzvos, right, are
is it written or it could be derived?
according to the Medrash, it seems to be they were actually written. You can interpret the Medrash to say that they were actually written, and that was the definition of Michtav Elokim. So I can't write like that. You can't write like that. Maybe an architect could write like that. I don't know, right? But that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu can write like that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can have the mitzvah, and in between these two things, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can fit everything that needs to be fit in there.
Even
Right.
the narrative of the Torah?
Not the narrative. We're not talking about narrative of
Yeah,
Torah.
we know he has narrative.
We're not talking about narrative of Torah right here, right? We're not talking about narrative of Torah. But we're going to see. So the Gemara in Maseches Brachos says Torah is Mikra. You could explain that to mean just Chamishe Chumshe Torah and just the mitzvos of Chamishe Chumshe Torah, not the story, not the narrative, but just the mitzvos, the halachically binding component of Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu got on Har Sinai. He got the narrative up until then, but the remaining narrative he didn't get, right? The remaining narrative he got as it unfolded. HaKadosh Baruch said, okay, Moshe Rabbeinu, write this down. But here, according to this Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was spending those 40 days up in, on the top of the mountain with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, during those 40 days, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught the entirety of the mitzvos that would come from the Torah. Not the narrative, but the entirety of the mitzvos that would come from the Torah. That says the Gemara in Brachos. That's Torah. Zo Mikra. The ha-mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? Zo Mishnah. According to the Gemara Maseches Brachos, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't only get Torah Shebichsav when he was on top of Har Sinai, but he also got Torah Sheba'al Peh. He got Mishnah. Now, what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu got Mishnah? Did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give Moshe Rabbeinu a set of Kahati Mishnayos? Is that what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu got Mishnah? No, it doesn't mean that Moshe Rabbeinu got Mishnah that way. What is Mishnah?
He said Torah Shabbat.
Right, but what is the conceptual definition of Mishnah?
It's an explanation of who was the
Explanation of the halakha.
All right, the Mishnah is the oral explication of the written tradition. What is Gemara?
It's the explanation.
Gemara is the oral explication, right, of the Mishnah. Okay, so we say that Moshe got, right, Vaha Mitzvah, Zo Mishnah, that Moshe got the Mishnah. He didn't get the Mishnah like Arvei Psachim, right? He got the ideas of the Mishnah. He got the commentary, the explication of the Mishnah. Asher kasavti, that I wrote down. Elu neviim uksuvim, right? The Gemara in Maseches Brachos says Moshe Rabbeinu got neviim. He got all of Tanakh, right? Neviim and ksuvim. So what does it mean? Moshe Rabbeinu knew what was going to be in the future. But Moshe Rabbeinu knew he got neviim and ksuvim. I understand Moshe Rabbeinu gets Torah. He gets the mitzvos of the Torah. I understand Moshe Rabbeinu gets an explanation of those mitzvos of the Torah. Right, that's the Mishnah. He gets the written mitzvos, he gets an explanation of it, but Nevi'im and Ksuvim, and yes, that's what the Gemara says, Nevi'im and Ksuvim, that Moshe got Tanakh as well. All right, now what does it mean Moshe got Tanakh as well? It means that Moshe Rabbeinu, according to the Gemara, knew what was going to be, not what was going to be during his lifetime. Because Nach is not during Moshe Rabbeinu's lifetime, right? Not, right? Correct. Moshe Rabbeinu knew about all of these things that was going to happen in the future to Klal Yisrael. He knew about, he didn't teach them to the Jewish people. These were not things that Moshe Rabbeinu passed down to the Jewish people. It was not his responsibility, right? But according to this Gemara Maseches Brachos, Nevi'im and Ksuvim, Moshe Rabbeinu got. Kadosh Baruch Hu taught Moshe Rabbeinu Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Think about it for a second. 40 days and 40 nights, is not a lot. It's not, right? It's a lot of time to sit and learn, especially if you're, Kadosh Baruch Hu is the teacher, and you don't have to eat and drink, and you don't have to go to the bathroom. So there was a lot, there was a lot to learn, but there was a lot of time to learn it also. This is the Gemara Maseches Brachos.
So that Gemara is based on what information? Because if Moshe got that information, got that knowledge, didn't tell anybody because he had it just for himself, whatever that means. But he didn't tell anyone, oh, by the way, guys, I know about this Purim thing in Hanukkah because just neat enough. How did the Masorah get down to the Gemara that, oh, by the way, Moshe knew all the stuff that Moshe has?
Well, so perhaps we can understand that what we have here is a conceptual idea. The conceptual idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu was privy to the entirety of the Jewish Torah, the entirety of Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was privy to that. That's the Masorah. That's the conceptual idea. That for 40 days and 40 nights, Kadosh Baruch Hu taught Moshe everything there was to know about Torah.
The answer is implicit in your question. In other words, if you're conceding that the Gemara and the Mishnah is part of a Masorah process, there had to be an original person who was giving the Masorah.
Well, so that, right, that's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but that doesn't account. But
There
there's
were
a
breakdowns in the process.
right. There were breakdowns in the process, and there were a lot of things that were not Masorah, so to speak, but just discussions about things. But if we start with the concept that Moshe Rabbeinu got the entirety of Torah, not only Chumash, but Tanakh, and not only Torah shebichsav, but Torah sheba'al peh as well. If that's the concept, Eddie, then what we need to do, and what the Gemara is attempting to do, is find hints to this in the Psukim. Find hints in the Psukim. So the Gemara says, okay, I'm confronted with the idea. My challenge is to somehow find an indication in the verse that will allow me to support or to substantiate the position that Moshe Rabbeinu received from God, Kol HaTorah Kula.
Anything that happens from here on in, where Moshe gets mad at the Jewish people, whether it's Morocco or whatever else, there really is no need for him to have gotten mad because he knew that it was going to happen and he knew it was.
No.
We
We spent a lot of time dealing with that, where we said that no, Moshe Rabbeinu, it was not like Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai was told, listen, you're going to lead the people to Israel, and they're going to want, you to appoint these Meraglim, and the Meraglim are going to turn the hearts of the people aside. Moshe didn't know that. Moshe didn't know that, or else Moshe Rabbeinu never would have done it. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know that the people were going to be worshiping the Egel HaZahav in a mere 40 days. Right? So it's not like Moshe Rabbeinu was told the narrative. And Moshe Rabbeinu, this is going to happen in a month, and it's going to happen in 2 months, it's going to happen in 6 months, it's going to happen in a year, this is going to happen in 30 years, so that Moshe Rabbeinu knew basically everything that was going to happen in the Midbar in advance. No. We said that there are no Mefarshim who say that. Right? There are no Mefarshim who say that. The Mefarshim struggle with how to say that Moshe was given the entirety of Torah, but without the narrative in advance. And we spoke about that, that after something happened, the Kadosh Baruch said, okay, Moshe, write this down. Right? Write this down. So, or else at the end of the whole process, right, Kadosh Baruch said, okay, this is how I want you to write down everything that occurred up.
That was a need-to-know basis. That was it. What God felt he needed to know, he told them. And the other things about Morocco and that he died before he went to Israel, that he didn't tell them.
We know for sure that there were things that God did not share with Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? And we just have to look at Chumash, and that's perfectly clear. Right? Times where Moshe Rabbeinu is frustrated, times where Moshe Rabbeinu is surprised, times where Moshe Rabbeinu gets angry. Now, on one hand, you could say, listen, even if you know something is going to happen, right? You know someone's going to die. But nevertheless, when that person dies, your emotions take over. And you could say Moshe Rabbeinu knew what was going to happen, but in the thick of it, when the moment, right, in that moment, in the thick of it, when it happened, Moshe Rabbeinu lost control, you could say. That's a possible explanation of it. But I think that's not the way in which most Mefarshim go. Most Mefarshim, I believe, want to say that Moshe Rabbeinu did not know the narrative in advance. He knew the mitzvos, right? But he did not know the narrative in advance.
Say the filing, how could he did this because Israel did not want to accept the Torah Shabbat, but the Torah Shabbat, they accepted.
Correct.
Right, so the details, all the halachot, they were hesitant to take it, right?
They were very hesitant to accept it.
Okay, now I want to ask a question, more contemporary. We're talking about revelation here. What is, from what I hear people speak, it's a divisive point between the Orthodox and conservative reform as to the revelation and their conception of revelation. So let's say you take the conservative movement. How much do they believe in this? Or do they say, well, it was divinely inspired, written by brilliant people, but it wasn't this direct contact that we just spoke about?
Who cares what they say? We're learning what we're supposed to do.
1 minute, but it's important to know. It's important.
So I don't know that I'm the right person to ask that question to. That's a question that I think you'd have to ask Rabbi Stecker or, another conservative rabbi, who could answer that from within the, within the movement's ideology. Clearly, just as an introduction, there's no one position within the conservative movement about this. The positions run from here to here. Now, we like to think that in Orthodoxy, that's not true. In Orthodoxy, there's one position about, right? But also, there's Dalet Amos of halacha, I should say, right? There's a certain latitude that even we have in art when it comes to our philosophy and our understanding of halacha and things like that. And you'll find, you're going to find perhaps even a wider latitude within the conservative movement. And then you have to also ask the question, what does the reform movement think about this? Which is more complicated because it goes to the whole nature of what the reform movement thinks about this book here, this thing that we call Chumash. Right?
They don't have a problem with the first.
There's different perspectives on it. It is a very valid question because this is a fundamental point of separation, point of departure between the Orthodox, conservative, and reform movement. There's no question. This is if not the fundamental, certainly one of the most fundamental points of departure between us.
With respect to Moshe's knowledge of Navi and so not, maybe it's easier to understand. Moshe is the ultimate Navi. In other words, you're not dealing with blank slate. You're dealing with somebody who has unbelievable prowess of prophecy. So in addition to the Baruch Shalom teaching him, you could have revelations of Navius that go forward into the future.
I mean, look, I think the Gemara is clearly painting a picture of a Moshe Rabbeinu that, sometimes we struggle to embrace. Namely, a Moshe Rabbeinu who had this knowledge. Moshe Rabbeinu who had more knowledge than perhaps anyone else ever in Jewish history. More knowledge of the future of what was going to be for the Jewish people. And yet at the same time, this is the same Moshe Rabbeinu who sat in Rabbi Akiva's class.
Right, so he didn't know about the crowns.
Didn't know about the crowns on the Torah. So, it's not, like you could say, all right, this is black and white, and, this is, right, and this is how it's explained. And there's a lot of gray here. What you have to do is you have to look within the sources. So this is a source from the Gemara.
Yaakov, when he gave the brachot to his sons, he wanted to tell and then he was coasting and he couldn't tell them.
Right.
So there are certain things that people may know but may not be allowed to say.
That's correct. Let's just finish up the Gemara. The Gemara says, Leho Rosam Zeg Gemara. Right, then Moshe Rabbeinu knew Gemara as well. It doesn't mean that Moshe Rabbeinu had an art scroll Gemara in front of him, right, or even a Vilna edition of the Gemara, but Moshe Rabbeinu understood the ways in which the Gemara would interpret the Mishnah. Moshe Rabbeinu understood those. Moshe Rabbeinu was taught those ways. And finally, the whole thing is tied up in this last expression of the Gemara, Milamed Shekulam Nasnu Lemoshe Misinai. From here we learn that everything that we embrace as Torah has its source on Har Sinai. So if you pick up a Chumash, you say, does this Chumash have its source on Har Sinai? So that's easy. Right? That's relatively easy to answer. You pick up an Art Scroll Gemara and you say, does this Gemara have its source on Har Sinai? So the answer is yes. This Gemara does have its source on Har Sinai. But is the source of this Gemara from Har Sinai exactly as it's printed in the pages in front of us? Clearly not. Clearly not. But the ideas behind it, the explications of it, right? The derivations, those are all things that had their source on Har Sinai. So that's, the Gemara is being very dogmatic here to suggest that Melamed shekulam nasnu leMoshe miSinai, that everything was given to Moshe at Har Sinai. Now, the truth is, when Moshe Rabbeinu died, what happened?
He was lost.
Right? There were hundreds, if not thousands, of laws that were lost when Moshe Rabbeinu died.
Joshua lost 300
Right.
laws.
And right, so, they had to then try to get them back, to get those laws that were forgotten back. So, it's not a linear development.
Didn't he teach those to get Yeshua? Yeshua was his student.
He got 300 laws himself.
And the Gemara talks about the tremendous emotional bang of Moshe Rabbeinu's passing
Oh, I see.
created this vacuum, this sense literally of abandonment that that caused the people to forget these laws. Forgot what they were taught.
Mysticism in the Zohar was that also.
I'm just going to quote the Gemara, Melamed shekulam nasnu leMoshe miSinai.
Okay.
Right? It doesn't mention here mysticism, but if we believe that mysticism is a further development of these other Makoros, so then yes. Now,
the tunes that you read the Torah was also
now there is this concept called halacha leMoshe miSinai. Right? Halacha leMoshe miSinai. Now, at first glance, the concept of halacha leMoshe miSinai should mean everything. What does the Gemara say?
Right.
Shekulam nasnu leMoshe miSinai. Moshe was given everything. So everything is halacha leMoshe miSinai. So the answer is no. It's not that everything is halacha leMoshe miSinai, right? Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu himself at this experience of revelation and Moshe Rabbeinu's particular revelation. It was specific to Moshe Rabbeinu and not to the entirety of the people. Moshe Rabbeinu's specific revelation, he did indeed know Kol HaTorah Kula, right? He did indeed know Kol HaTorah Kula. However, there are certain things that were taught subsequently that acquired the status of halacha leMoshe miSinai. So, as just some examples, very, very famous examples, right? Tefillin need to be black. If you look high and low in Chumash, nowhere will you find that tefillin need to be black. How do we know tefillin need to be black? Maybe I want to wear a pair of white tefillin. Maybe I want to wear a pair of aqua tefillin. Right? How do I know that tefillin need to be black? Because halacha leMoshe miSinai. Right? That within our source, within our Masorah, we say that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he taught the section of tefillin, he said they have to be black. People said, Moshe, how do you know tefillin have to be black? It doesn't say here that they have to be black. Moshe said, God told me tefillin have to be black. Halacha leMoshe miSinai. Additionally, how do we know that tefillin need to be square? Right? Why? Maybe tefillin are round. Maybe tefillin are triangular. In other words, how do we know that tefillin need to be square? So square that the sofer measures the ribua, the squareness of the tefillin with a caliper. That's how square they have to be. And if you are careless with your tefillin and you dent a corner of your tefillin, you passel the tefillin. There are people who, in their zealousness to daven, right, bang into the wall with their tefillin, right? They do, right, korim or whatever, they bang into the wall with their tefillin and dent the corner. It's a big problem. Has to be repaired. So how do we know that tefillin have to be square? Because halacha l'Moshe Sinai. How do we know when we put on tefillin the shel rosh, of which it said that it should be bein einechem? If I were to ask what is bein einechem, what would you answer me? Right here. So bein einechem is right here. But where do we wear tefillin? Right here, but up here. How do I know that? How do I know that tefillin are supposed to be worn where I want my hairline to be one day? Again. All right. How do I know that? I know that because it is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. If I follow just what the Torah tells me, I'm putting my tefillin right here. But that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Additionally, right, nowhere in the Torah does it tell me how I am supposed to kill an animal in order to eat that animal. It doesn't tell me that anywhere in the Torah. If I look in the Torah, for how to kill an animal, it doesn't say a word. It doesn't say a word. But it talks about slaughtering an animal, and the words that are used is ka'asher tzivi sicha, says the Kaddish Baruch Hu, right? That you should slaughter this animal ka'asher tzivi sicha. What does it mean? Like I commanded you. Where? Not in here. Kaddish Baruch Hu didn't command us in here about shechita. Where did we learn the laws of shechita? Right, where did we learn the laws of shechita? Kaddish Baruch Hu taught it to Moshe. Moshe taught it to Bnei Yisrael. Right, that's this idea of the Torah Shabbat. Correct. And according to the Gemara and according to other sources that we've seen, all of those things are included. All of those things are included in this idea. Rashi, very fundamental. We learn the Rashi. Kol sheish me'os v'shlosh esrei mitzvos b'chlal aseres adibros. Right? Like Rav Sadia says, Rashi quotes Rav Sadia Goa. Right? V'Rabbeinu Sa'adia Piresh v'Azharos sheyosa l'chol dibor v'dibor mitzvos hatuluyos bo. Right? That Rav Sadia explains how every mitzvah is shoehorned into one of these 10 major categories.
If what we're talking about is Moshe having that comprehensive, full knowledge of all the halachas, it makes sense for him to go and understand everything through Mishnah and Gemara, because how it's interconnected, he needs that comprehension in every which way, every wherefore and whereby and all that kind of thing, just so he can follow through. So that all makes sense, but any other information I'm confused by. That's when you mentioned Nach. It didn't make sense to me, because what are the halachas we get? We get halachas on Nach, or?
Yes, again.
Well, we do not get the same number of halachos from Nach that we derive from, certainly from Chumash, right? From Torah. But there are halachos that we do derive from Nach. And whether the Gemara is referring to those halachos that we derive from Nach, or whether it's referring to the narrative that is Nach, maybe it's referring to the concepts that are embodied in Nach. So that's a whole discussion about what the meaning of this Gemara must have as problems.
Annabi died, and Aaron was, I think at the time, he was supposed to.
Another Annabi who died on the last day on the 8th day following the 7 days of Chanukah Samishna.
And he was supposed to do something on that day.
He did.
But I thought he begged off, saying that he had a disagreement with Moshe.
It wasn't that he had a disagreement with Moshe. This was one of the three times in Torah where Moshe Rabbeinu becomes angry, and as a result of Moshe Rabbeinu's anger, he forgets the halacha. It's not that he disagrees. It's not that Aharon did something wrong. It was that Moshe Rabbeinu, in his anger, right, thinking that Aharon had done something wrong, was mistaken.
I'm wrestling with two things here, particularly. How is it known that Moshe had a lot of laws that people didn't know about?
I mean, that was the question that I think Eddie was asking earlier.
And the next point is, if that in fact is so, why did Hashem teach it to you? The ones that were not passed on. What was the point? If he knew he was going to die.
So perhaps we can understand it from the perspective.
Come up to the mountain and I'll give you the Luchos, the Hatorah.
No, right, but I think what Leslie is asking is why. In other words, if there wasn't going to be, if what Moshe Rabbeinu was going to know was for Moshe Rabbeinu and not as part of the Mesorah that was Moshe Rabbeinu was going to pass on, which clearly it was not. In other words, if we say Moshe Rabbeinu when he knew Nach, he knew the narrative of Nach, so clearly Moshe Rabbeinu did not pass that on because, that was all a surprise to people throughout Jewish history. So we'd have to say that he did not pass that particular knowledge on. If, on the other hand, we say Moshe Rabbeinu, when we say he knew Nach, he knew that general concept of it, right, of the principles of Nach, that makes it a little bit different. But let's stick with the narrative, okay? Let's perhaps answer your question in the following way. Let's say that an individual is a master architect, okay? Well, hypothetical case, right? He's a master architect, and he teaches a class teaches several classes in a university. And he's got many students, and he teaches all of the students, the fundamentals of architecture, like he learned it as he developed it. He teaches all of his students that. One student stands out head and shoulders above the rest. And this teacher realizes that he can share with this student things that the other students would never grasp. That the other students simply they don't have the innate ability, nor the developed ability, nor the potential to develop that ability to understand what this master architect could pass on to this stellar student. But he would still pass it on to this stellar student for the sake of the relationship between him and this student, and the knowledge of what that student could potentially do, even if that student could not pass it on to anyone else. So that's from my perspective, that's the way in which we can understand this here. You want to say something?
I would say that you love Moshe very much. You had a very close relationship with him. If you love somebody very much, you can try to get in contact with him as much as you can.
And it wasn't simply love. I mean, I don't mean to downplay love by saying it wasn't simply love, but like Mike said, Moshe Rabbeinu was the, Lokam Kemoshe Od Navi, right? Israel will never have another Navi like a Moshe Rabbeinu. There will never be anyone who was on that spiritual level like a Moshe Rabbeinu. So, okay. So let's continue on with the Chumash. I am determined one day to turn the page. Right, so we're on 442. Yud Gimel, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayaka Moshe v'Hoshua misharso. That Moshe got up, and his student and his servant Yehoshua. Vaya'al Moshe el har ha'elokim. And Moshe ascends the mountain of God. Now, this is obviously a fulfillment of the pasuk which immediately preceded it. What was the pasuk that immediately preceded it? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe alei Eloi hahara. Come, right? Ascend, alei Eloi. Ascend to me, to this mountain, to the top of this mountain. And Moshe Rabbeinu was doing that. So, according to the Ramban, interestingly, this is not only a fulfillment of that mitzvah, but the Ramban turns all the way back and says, this is happening before Matan Torah. Rashi says this is all happening after Matan Torah. But the Ramban wants to take it back even further. But the question that we have to ask is, whoa, where's Yehoshua? All of a sudden, the Torah is introducing Yehoshua. Did we hear anything else about Yehoshua here? First of all, his name at this point wasn't Yehoshua. Right? What day are we talking about? We are talking about 49 days after Yetzias Mitzrayim. 49 days after Yetzias Mitzrayim. When was this fellow's name changed to Yehoshua? It was changed at the time when the Meraglim were sent out. When were the Meraglim sent out? In the second year. Right? Forget, we're not even close to the second year. we're only 49 days away from the beginning of the first year.
Right.
It wasn't called Yehoshua. That wasn't his name.
Ein Mukdam Mu'achar.
So why is he referred to here as Yehoshua? So we can answer the question in actually a number of ways. The Medrash, the Psikta Zutrasa, which is one of the Midrashim, wants to say as follows: Adayin lo haya shemo Yehoshua ad shana shniya. His name wasn't yet Yehoshua, and it wasn't changed until the second year. Shenishtalchu hamiraglim, when the miraglim were sent out, Hashem changes his name from Hosea to Yehoshua in order to protect him from the council of the miraglim who were going to speak ill about the land of Israel. So answers the Psikta, why is he called Yehoshua here? Ela shekasvu al shum shenihiyeh. That what? It's the Torah is writing now what will be. In other words, yes, you're right. His name now is not Yehoshua. His name is Hosea. But his name is going to be Yehoshua. So the Torah here is writing about what will be. V'chein, and the Medrash brings another example. Vayomer Moshe el Yehoshua bachar lanu anashim. Right? At an even earlier point than this, in the battle against Amalek, what happened? In the battle against Amalek, so Moshe Rabbeinu says to Yehoshua, Vayomer Moshe, I'm sorry, let me just give it the pasuk again. V'chein Vayomer Moshe el Yehoshua. Moshe says to Yehoshua, says the Torah. This was even before Matan Torah. He's referred to as Yehoshua. So the answer is, he's called what he will ultimately be known as. But listen to what the Psikta Zutrasa says. He says, also this comes lilamedcha, to teach us she'ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. That what? That he's called Yehoshua here. You could say, wait a second, how can he be called Yehoshua here if the change of his name didn't take place until much later? Answers the Psikta Zutrasa, ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. That what? That there's no chronology to the Torah. That there is no chronology to the Torah. Now, let's think about something for a minute. What does it mean that there's no chronology to the Torah? What about if the Torah tells us that something happens at date X? Right? The Torah tells us something happens in the month of Nisan. And then the Torah tells us something happens in the month of Nisan in the Shana Shniya in the second year. Is not one before the other? Of course one is before the other. Right? There's no question that one is before the other under those circumstances. But when the Torah does not give us specific dates, when the Torah does not give us knowledge that would preclude this idea, says the Psikta, we have a general principle of ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah, meaning that even though the Torah might appear to us to be written chronologically, that the Torah was not necessarily shared chronologically. But there are parts of the Torah that were given or taught before other parts of the Torah, even though they might appear to be out of chronological order.
There's one caveat, the same paragraph.
Correct, that's correct. Ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah is limited to different topics. But within a topic, meaning within a paragraph, within a parsha, within a topic, we say there is mukdam u'meuchar. Why is this principle limited by that?
Because otherwise you couldn't see what's going on.
Yeah, because we have to ascribe to an independent narrative chronology, or else it doesn't make any sense. Whereas if there's never chronology in the Torah, then the Torah doesn't make any sense. There is chronology in the Torah, but the entirety of the Torah is not written necessarily in chronological order.
I think also, if we study the name Yehoshua versus Hosea, they have two different meanings.
Good, that's true.
Hosea means, I think, God has helped. Yehoshua is God will help. Hashem will.
Okay,
So maybe that, Yehoshua.
that's what's being
is the-
referred to here.
Is the name of a person in process of development.
Could be.
Moshe is somebody
I think
who
that
has
that's,
gone through the, what?
It's a plausible understanding, certainly of the difference between the two names. But the Meforshim continue to say, why is Yehoshua being brought into this?
All of a sudden.
Look at Rashi. Rashi asks the question as only Rashi can. Rashi says as follows. It is at the top of the second column of Rashi on 442. Vayakam Moshe v'Yehoshua misharso, says Rashi, lo yadati matibo shel Yehoshua kan. What does Rashi say? I don't know what's going on. Rashi says, I don't understand why Yehoshua is being brought up here.
Well, he was waiting.
Lo yadati matibo shel Yehoshua kan, says Rashi. And then he gives us an answer. First, Rashi says it's not clear. I don't understand why he's here, but let me tell you what I think. Va'omer ani shahaya hatalmid milavel larav ad mikom hagbalat tchumei hahar. Now, what happened? Says Rashi that Moshe Rabbeinu was back in the camp, and Kadosh Baruch Hu said, "Okay, come on up." And Moshe leaves the camp, and who escorts Moshe?
Yehoshua.
Why?
Because he's the Mashareis.
Correct. He is Moshe Rabbeinu's Mishares. Every Rebbe needs a Mishares, right? So Yehoshua was Moshe Rabbeinu's Mishares, and according to this interpretation, says Rashi, Yehoshua literally walked with Moshe from the Machane to the Har, to the furthest point at which Yehoshua could go. There he said goodbye to Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu continued from that point up the mountain, up to the very top of the mountain.
And then he actually waited.
What did Yehoshua do?
He waited too much.
So we say that Yehoshua actually sat and waited there at the foot of the mountain until Moshe came down 40 days later. The Ibn Ezra says, Rashi says it. Rashi says, Yehoshua nata sham oholo, that Yehoshua set up his tent there at the bottom of the mountain, v'nis akev sham kol arba'im yom. And he was there for all 40 days. How do we know that? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain, right, who's the first person he sees? Yehoshua. And he asks Yehoshua, what's going on?
It's the sound of words.
But Yehoshua doesn't know. Why doesn't Yehoshua know what's going on? Because for the last 40 days, Yehoshua has been sitting at the bottom of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain, waiting for his Rebbe to come back down. He doesn't know what's going on in the Machane. Right?
He couldn't see down what's going on. From middle of the mountain, he couldn't see what's going on.
No, he heard the noise.
Just the noise.
Moshe Rabbeinu heard the noise, and Yehoshua obviously heard the noise, but they didn't know what the noise was all about. They didn't have social media in those days.
Very good food for 40 days.
Oh, so Albert, if you've ever been to a Sunday morning Medrash breakfast that Albert sponsors, so you know that it is, one of these things that is very unique. So what happened? Where did he eat? Listen to what the Ibn Ezra says. The Ibn Ezra and Albert, maybe because your names sound similar, was mechavein to exactly your question. And what does he say? V'ein ta'am lish'ol ma achal. And there's no reason to ask, what did Yehoshua eat? Ki haman saviv lamachaneh. Because what did anybody eat? Man. They ate this man that fell around the camp. Lakat v'achal yom yom. What did Yehoshua do? Yehoshua ate the man like everybody else. Right? The man didn't fall just in the camp. The man fell outside of the camp. Yehoshua went, he collected the man that he needed for that day, he came back to his tent, and that's what he ate. It's an excellent question, and Ibn Ezra knew you were going to ask it. Right? And the Ibn Ezra planted this answer to, So this is Rashi's perspective. Rashi's perspective is Moshe was back in the Machane. He was with his Talmud Muvhak Yehoshua, God says, okay, Moshe, come back up now. You're going to be with me for 40 days. I'm going to give you everything. And Moshe Rabbeinu, gets ready and he goes and Yehoshua goes with him. They reach the foot of the mountain. Says there's a sign there that says no trespassing except Moshe. Yehoshua parks himself there, waits for 40 days, and Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the top of the mountain. This is Rashi's perspective. Of course, the Ramban is not happy. Ramban says, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. He quotes Rashi's, the Ramban quotes Rashi, the whole thing that we've said, right? Up until and including Yehoshua was not at the Machane, he was at the foot of the mountain. And says the Ramban, V'al da'ati, I have a different take here, says the Ramban. V'al da'ati haya Yehoshua michlal shivim hazakenim. What does the Ramban say? Or what's Yehoshua doing here? Yehoshua was one of the 70 of the Zakenim who came up with Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, we learned that who came up? Moshe, Aharon,
Two of his sons.
Nadav Avihu, and the Shivim Zakenim.
Wait a minute. Wait, okay. But I always thought that Yehoshua had a distinctive presence of the Zakenim because it says, Moshe Kibbutz Torah Misinai, Umasarah Yehoshua was Zakenim. So he was like a bridge. I don't think he was, part of the Zakenim.
So you're a Rashi person. Ramban would disagree with you.
I'll tell you what, it's a
Right, the Ramban would disagree with you, and the Ramban would say, listen to the words of the Ramban, listen to this. Ki ein b'Yisrael shivim zikenim ru'uyim lahakrava el ha'elokim yoser mimenu. Says the Ramban, I can't imagine picking 70 people who could come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu and not having Yehoshua be the first one picked. In other words, Yehoshua was on such a level, being this perpetual Talmid of Moshe, Yehoshua was on such a level that of course he would be one of the Shivim Zakenim. And hold on just a second. I just want to build this very quickly. I want to build it up because according to Rashi, where are we starting from? According to Rashi, we're starting from Moshe being back in the Machane with Yehoshua. According to the Ramban, we're starting in a different place. According to the Ramban, we're still on Har Sinai. So if you remember what happened, Moshe, Aharon, Nadav, Avihu, and the Shivim Zakenim come up the mountain. Everybody stops at the point which is appropriate for them to stop. Moshe gets the furthest up the mountain, not up to the top yet, but Moshe gets the furthest up to the mountain, and then the others stop shorter than that, okay? And now, says the Ramban, what happens? They're still on the mountain. What happens is God says to Moshe, okay, Moshe, now you come all the way up. You come all the way up. So what happens? So according to the Ramban, Yehoshua leaves the Shivim Zakenim. Remember, the Zakenim had this miraculous spiritual revelation on revelation on Har Sinai. And what happened? So now Yehoshua walks with Moshe up the mountain as far as he could go. He can't go as far as Moshe Rabbeinu can go. He detaches from the Zakenim and he gets as far as he can go. Now says the Ramban, maybe you're going to ask me the question, we learned that these Zakenim are punished.
Yes.
Right? These Zakenim are killed.
Why?
Because as we learned, and you have to go back, you have to go online and listen to the tapes, because what happened? Because they had this tremendous spiritual experience, and according to some, they
At a feast.
they sat and ate. They absolutely they chose the physical pleasures of eating and drinking over the spiritual pleasures of closeness to God. And they were punished. These Zakenim were killed later on. And Nadav and Avihu were killed later on. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't kill them now because he didn't want to mar Matan Torah. But they were killed later on. If Yehoshua was part of the Zakenim,
Right.
so how can the Ramban say that Yehoshua is part of the Zakenim? So the Ramban will answer and he'll say, It's not a big deal. Yehoshua, even though he was part of Zakanim, he was on a completely different level. Right? He was on a completely different level than the others that came. They brought food, but they had we learned. We said maybe they were the sacrifices. Remember that that they had the young men go and offer sacrifices. So this might have been the sacrificial meat that they were answering. So based on this idea, so Yehoshua goes up as far as he can go. Then Moshe continues. Now what happens? Now everybody goes back to the Machane except for Yehoshua. What does Yehoshua do? Yehoshua stays at the foot of the mountain and waits for Moshe. But the Zakanim and Aharon and Nadav and Avihu go back to the Machane. And as we'll see next week, Moshe has to leave someone in charge of the Machane. And who does he leave in charge of the Machane and why? And in Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll talk about that next week.
So Yoshua was always on a higher level than the king, right?